You're standing in line at a coffee shop when a stranger walks in wearing an expensive watch. You notice it instantly. Maybe you don't care. Maybe you even dislike displays of wealth. But your brain noticed anyway. It couldn't help itself. A few minutes later, someone in a tailored suit walks past, and again your brain notices. Not consciously, automatically. Some ancient part of your mind begins measuring status before you've even decided whether status matters. And that's strange, because if you travel back through human history past skyscrapers, corporations, kings, empires, and farming villages, you arrive at a mystery hidden around campfires for tens of thousands of years. The further back we go, the harder it becomes to find social classes at all. Not weaker social classes, not simpler social classes, no social classes. And that raises an uncomfortable question. If humans seem obsessed with status today, why did our ancestors spend most of their existence trying to stop anyone from becoming too powerful? Imagine it's 20,000 years ago. The sun is sinking below the horizon. A cold wind moves across the grasslands. Smoke rises from scattered campfires. Children chase each other between shelters made from animal hides. Hunters return carrying meat, and the smell of roasting food fills the air. Now look around. Who is the richest person here? Who owns the most land? Who inherited the most wealth? Who sits at the bottom of society? The strange answer may be that nobody in this camp would even understand those questions, and that's where the mystery begins. Most of us imagine ancient humans as primitive versions of ourselves. We picture chiefs, rulers, powerful families, and people beneath them. Hierarchy feels natural. It feels inevitable. After all, every modern society has it. Companies have bosses, armies have generals, countries have leaders, even schools have principals. Hierarchy seems as human as language itself. But here's the strange part. For more than 95% of human history, our ancestors lived as hunter-gatherers, and anthropologists have discovered something remarkable. Many of these societies weren't simply equal. They actively fought inequality. Think about that for a moment. Not because they were idealists, not because they had political theories, because they believed hierarchy itself was dangerous. Imagine a hunter spending hours tracking an animal across miles of wilderness. He finally brings it down and drags hundreds of pounds of meat back to camp. Today we'd expect applause, maybe a trophy, maybe a viral social media post. Instead, something bizarre happens. People laugh at him, they insult the animal, they joke that it's too small, they tease him relentlessly. At first glance, it seems cruel. Why mock the person who just fed everyone? But that's not what was happening. The jokes weren't aimed at the meat. They were aimed at his ego. Ancient humans understood something powerful. A hunter who starts believing he's special today may start demanding privileges tomorrow, a bigger share of food, more authority, more control, and eventually, power. The teasing acted like a social vaccine. It prevented hierarchy before hierarchy could spread. But that discovery creates an even bigger mystery. If humans were working so hard to suppress inequality, why? Why were they afraid of it? To answer that question, we have to travel even further back, not into history, but into evolution. For millions of years, our ancestors lived among creatures obsessed with dominance. Look at baboons. Look at chimpanzees. Look at wolves. Hierarchy is everywhere. The strongest individuals often gain first access to food, mates, and resources. Power is old. Very old. Long before humans existed, evolution was already running experiments with dominance. And humans inherited some of those instincts. We care about reputation. We notice confidence. We pay attention to influence. Status matters to us. But here's where things get weird. Humans evolved something that almost no other animal possesses: the ability for weaker individuals to unite against stronger ones. Imagine a chimpanzee troop. A dominant male becomes aggressive, and the others usually avoid him, submit to him, or fear him. Now imagine a group of humans. One individual becomes a bully. Something different happens. The group talks, forms alliances, shares information, builds coalitions. Suddenly, the strongest individual isn't facing one opponent. He's facing everyone. Anthropologists sometimes call this reverse dominance. The group dominates the would-be dominator. In other words, ancient humans may have spent thousands of generations inventing ways to stop power from concentrating. Not because they hated leaders, but because they feared tyrants. And for a very long time it worked. But that's not the whole story. Because eventually something changed, something so ordinary that it barely seems important. For most of human existence, wealth was difficult to store. You caught food, you ate food, end of story. You couldn't build a fortune out of mammoth meat. Nature didn't provide freezers. A great hunter might earn respect, but he couldn't easily accumulate wealth. Then agriculture arrived, and suddenly humans discovered something civilization-changing. Food could stay put. Grain could be stored. Stored grain became stored wealth. Stored wealth became power, and power became hereditary. For the first time, a person could possess more than they immediately needed. For the first time, someone could control resources without personally gathering them. And once that happened, the rules of human society began to change. Imagine two villages. One grows enough food to survive, the other produces enormous surpluses. At first, that sounds like success, but a new question immediately appears. Who controls the extra grain? Who guards it? Who distributes it? Who decides who receives it? The moment surplus appears, power enters the room, and power rarely leaves voluntarily. Now things get interesting. Archaeologists have uncovered clues hidden beneath ancient soil. For tens of thousands of years, many human burials look surprisingly similar. Then something changes. Some graves become filled with ornaments, jewelry, weapons, and exotic materials. Others remain nearly empty. For the first time, inequality begins appearing in death itself. The skeletons are silent, but they're telling a story. A story about social classes being born not overnight, but gradually, like cracks spreading across frozen water. But here's the real surprise. Recent discoveries suggest this transformation wasn't inevitable. Some prehistoric societies appear to have experimented with different ways of organizing themselves. During certain seasons, they became more hierarchical. During others, they became more egalitarian. It's almost as if humanity spent thousands of years testing social systems, trying them on, taking them off, and reinventing them. History wasn't marching toward kings and empires. History was improvising. And nobody knew where the experiment would lead. Now jump back to the present. Think about your daily life. Promotions, job titles, follower counts, luxury brands, political power, social status. At first, these seem like modern inventions, but they're connected to something ancient, because inside every human brain, two competing instincts are still fighting. One whispers, climb higher, gain status, stand out. The other whispers, be fair, share. Don't let anyone become too powerful, and neither voice ever completely wins. That's why arguments about wealth and inequality never disappear. That's why every society struggles with the same questions. How much power is too much? How much inequality is acceptable? Who deserves more? Who deserves less? These aren't new debates. They're ancient echoes, conversations that may have begun around campfires long before cities existed. So, did ancient humans have social classes? The answer is stranger than a simple yes or no. They had status, they had respect, they had influence. But many of them also built social systems specifically designed to stop those differences from becoming permanent classes. For most of human history, hierarchy wasn't simply accepted. It was challenged, mocked, resisted, and sometimes even feared. And maybe that's the strangest discovery of all. When we look at billionaires, celebrities, presidents, kings, and emperors, we assume we're looking at the natural outcome of human nature. But for most of our existence, none of those things existed. Our ancestors lived through thousands of generations without inherited wealth, without permanent ruling classes, and without the social ladder we take for granted. The world we call normal would have seemed bizarre to them, and their world would seem impossible to us. Which means the real mystery was never whether ancient humans had social classes. The real mystery is why a species that spent most of its history resisting inequality eventually built civilizations around it. Somewhere between the campfire and the city, humanity changed the rules, or perhaps thousands of tiny decisions changed them for us. And those decisions still shape every country, every company, every neighborhood, and every life alive today. Because social class is not just a feature of modern society, it's a living fossil. A reminder that deep inside every human being, the hunter-gatherer and the ruler are still negotiating the future of the tribe. And every debate about wealth, power, fairness, and status is simply the latest chapter in a conversation that began beside a fire long before anyone had ever imagined civilization.